to see you, man. Long time no see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, short time in the grand scheme of things. I feel like quite a few of us are going to be around for many years.
Yeah.
And the world gets smaller every year.
That's right. Yeah, years get shorter.
Yeah.
I remember you saying, because obviously you went from active, you went through building management, operations management to body corporate account management. We're both in the same industry. We're sat around the same table as these people. Now you're sitting on a different, you're sitting on a different side of that table essentially. How have you found that transition?
Yeah, good. In many ways, in my head, it's all very much part of the same machine. There's definitely some differences. I mean, they say that being a body corporate manager is like 1/3 accounting, 1/3 legal, and 1/3 people.
Oh wow!
So I guess the building management probably much more hands-on. I mean, we don't go out to the buildings anywhere near as much. We're not sticking our hands down drains and filling with some of that sort of stuff. But all the principles are the same. So if you're dealing with you're still dealing with committees and people and common people, not so people that don't know the industry. So there's always a lot of education, but definitely a lot more report writing. We hold the AGMs, so there's always agendas and minutes to be done, and they're done to a very high standard. So I've had to brush up on my formal writing, and make sure that's of a good speed. But it's good. It's a lot of it's very similar, I would say.
The communication's an interesting one. Just talking to another body corporate manager recently about you've got to be a good communicator, and you've got to be able to talk to a wide range of people. Do you find that because you're a good communicator as a building operations manager as well, did you find that that's one of the main things you've had to carry across?
Yes. Yeah, I think strong. I think in both businesses, very strong customer service and very strong relationship management is key. And if you probably primary, if you do those two things well, it's the most important thing. And I would say I'm still always trying to improve both of those things. I wouldn't say I'm a superstar in those areas, but you try. A lot of it's getting on with people.
Talking about superstar, like what do you think was your best quality that you carried over from here to body corporate account managing?
Oh, geez.
How many have you got?
Tough question.
Yeah, mate, straight off the bat. No mucking around.
Best quality. I guess being able to get on with people. A certain level of confidence is important. And just caring. That's a lot of it. People want you to stop and pay attention and actually treat them well, and help them out. And a lot of it is as simple as that.
Yeah, because it is a service industry. We're not selling a product. We're selling a service. Same across both the industries there. So yeah, it's not a take it or leave it type job. And I think what you said about caring is actually it's massively relevant, man. Just to people want to feel like they're being listened to, that their concerns or issues are being managed or solved through to resolution. Yeah.
And I mean, obviously it's busy, so you need to remind yourself to care day to day. But it's mostly just helping people. As with many service industries. So yeah, but it's great when you do help people. It's very satisfying.
Yeah. And so you would have started at quite a strange time, because I think without giving away dates and things, yesterday was a year since we went into that last bloody level 4 lockdown.
Yeah.
And so your entrance into the body corporate management industry wasn't too long before that, so you would have had like, oh yeah, normal, and then boom, probably 6 months working from home. How was that all for you?
It was okay. It was difficult in some ways. The work part was not too bad. I think I had 6 weeks of training in the office before that lockdown. I'm glad I had that.
Yeah.
It would have been much more difficult without that. Others didn't get that. And yeah, I think because I had that, I was in reasonably good stead. And so after that, the sort of questions that I had, I could answer on the phone or on a Teams meeting or via email. And yeah, so I was lucky to get that initial setup. So the lockdown was okay. The company's very well. So unlike Active, where it's everything pretty much carries on because you're very much a at the coalface provider, ensuring the sanitising of buildings and the safety of buildings and the compliance of buildings, and largely everything carries on as far as going to site and coming into work. With Strata, it's the other way around, and when the lockdowns happen, it's like, okay, so everyone just go home. Everyone.
Wow.
And thankfully they're very well set up to do that. They've been through it once already.
Yep.
And it works really well, actually. It's very, very well set up to do that. It was reasonably seamless.
Has it still continued like that, or has everyone come back into the office? Because I hear from different body corp management companies that there's like a happy mixture of both, like work from home for a few days and the office for a few days.
Yeah, it is very much like that. And life is a bit more complicated in that way, but it mostly works quite well. And I think it definitely needs to be a balance. I think number one, it's great to be able to collaborate face to face with your peers and your colleagues. It's very important to catch up with your clients face to face, and it's very similar to Active, I think. And I feel like it's a bit of a truism, really, and I don't think that'll go away. So you can't just sort of go and sit in another country and do your job completely effectively.
Sit on the beach in Bali or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice in some ways. That would be. It's really nice to see people face to face, have a chat. There's something about that face to face that's important. And the sort of trickier the situation, the more difficult the situation, the more important the face to face becomes.
Yeah, I guess a lot can be solved with a face to face meeting a lot quicker than trying to deal with it over emails, or even an old phone call can be a little bit impersonal at times.
Yep.
What was the thing that you were most apprehensive about going from building management and operational management to body corporate account management? Was there one particular thing where you're like, oh Christ, this is going to be a challenge?
Well, I think for me personally, when I came into building management, a big part of it was getting out from behind the computer and out of the office. And also getting some variety day to day, not just being in one place. So I was sort of going, after 12 years or something, I was going back in that direction. So that was probably my sort of biggest risk in my head. But I'd also, I think in that time, pretty much found the industry that I'm very comfortable with.
Awesome.
Probably for the rest of my life. So I
That's
knew,
cool,
building management, property management, body corporate management. I think I started in IT and banking, and I moved out of that into building management. And I think, after I've been in building management for 5 years, I was like, yep, okay, I think this is it. This or something like it. And so I had that confidence, and and it seems to be pretty much playing out. I mean, I do, the thing with building management about, popping around your buildings, doing your walkthroughs, getting out and about, the variety that, the different people you see face to face every day is, that's still really fantastic, I think. Really attractive part of the industry.
I remember we had a chat before you left, and one thing I remember you saying was that you love the industry. And like I was like, far out, like that's, I mean that in a bad way. I was like, far, that's a awesome thing to say, but it's awesome for like to actually realise that, and to go, crikey, actually, I enjoy being part of this industry. I'm just going to try it from a different angle. And to hear you say that, you found body corporate management side of things, and you think that's going to be, the career moving forward, man. That's cool. That's really good.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, and it's satisfying when you do good work. In building management and in body corporate management. I mean, I do view them. I think once you've been doing either a while, I do view them as actually quite similar. The principles we all work under, in both businesses are very similar. The idea of how a body corporate works, and that any service contracted to a body corporate has to get value for money. All those principles that you work under that guide you all the time are the same. And you can see it's a very you're very close to the coalface. It's very obvious when you're providing value, which I like.
Have you ever been in a situation, say if you're sitting there, and hopefully this isn't with any of our guys, you're sitting there in a committee meeting, because you love the committee meetings, and there's a building manager there, and they're doing a report, and you're sitting there listening to it from your new perspective, but also probably you've got one ear that's still maybe listening to it from the building management perspective as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. So early on, probably 9 months to a year ago, I had to be a little bit careful not to get too involved in the building management. In some ways I still do, because I pick up on things, after 12 years of building management, I pick up on things that other people don't, and it's very tempting to it can be tempting to micromanage the building manager, and I have to remind myself not to do that. It's also pleasing that I was sort of worried in some ways that, I might forget all that building management stuff, and it'd be a shame for all of that time and experience to disappear completely, but it hasn't, and it doesn't, because I think with body corporate management you're still involved with that to some degree. You're still in those committee meetings, you're still seeing what's going on, you're talking to the building manager, you're approving certain invoices, and you need to understand what's going on. So you're sort of still involved and still across that, which is kind of nice.
And so what part of it have you had to improve the most on, do you think, or what part of it have you had to learn the most about to go from what you were doing to what you're doing now?
Report writing and the Unit Titles Act.
Oh, yeah.
So...
hey, and you've got another revision of that coming up soon too.
Yeah. It keeps changing. It's an interesting part of the industry in many ways. But yeah, definitely the sort of the finer details, and it's that situation you get of once a week or once a month where it's a slightly unusual set of circumstances when you're like, oh, I know all the normal stuff, but how does this unusual situation work? And then you're sort of diving into the act and talking to colleagues about has this been tested in court or not, and which way did it go, and that sort of thing. And the report writing, I guess, and that's the one thing that is different in the role we're doing. We do a lot of reports, and that's AGM minutes, AGM agendas, and committee reports, and that's part of our roles. It's a partly administrative role. We keep things ticking, and we make sure that these body corporates run the way they're meant to.
So is the report writing similar to the reports that we used to write? Because I would have thought that your reports would have largely been, say, about financials and that sort of thing. Or do you go beyond that?
It's what you see at AGMs. So it's the AGM agenda, and it is financial. It's actually kind of legal, really. I mean, we're not lawyers, but the AGM agendas and the AGM minutes, the way they look and read, are very much dictated to by the Unit Titles Act, and also, the best way of doing those in the right way. And it's very important that you do those in the right way. Body corporates can be complicated things, and if you're sort of sloppy with all of that, it's very open to be challenged, and that causes cost and problems. Yeah.
They're official documents too, right? So once you send out minutes for something, that's the record of it.
Yep.
And body corporates have a chance to review those minutes and make sure that they're accurate. But once they're signed off, that's a historical document for that building.
Yeah, they are legal documents, especially the minutes they go out with, and they're provided as part of property sales. And if there's problems with that,
Section 30, what is it?
Section 146 and Section 147.
Yeah.
So it's I won't bore you with all the finer details, but when a property changes hands, typically various records related to the body corporate are provided, and the AGM minutes is one of them. So it can have sort of costly consequences if they aren't right. So there's that. That's probably another area where there's probably a bit more legal risk in body corporate management than in building management. I mean, there's risk in both. But I'm sort of, I guess, had a lot of good training over the years as a building manager and an operations manager, so fully aware that in all of these things, you need to do things the right way and if you don't, there can be consequences.
That must have been a less risky part of changing career, is that you were kind of going into something that you already had a good view of, because we view the body corporate management companies, we see them as a partner in a lot of ways. When we work with our clients together, we call it the three-legged stool. There's there's the committee, the body corporate manager, and us. And so you would have seen it from a perspective, so you weren't entirely sort of overwhelmed or new to it when you actually got into that other perspective of it with account management.
Yeah, I definitely. I think I understood the overall picture pretty well. It was, a couple of the skills, the day-to-day skills like the report writing, and the UTA knowledge that I probably had to fill in a bit more. But yeah, I totally agree. And that three-legged stool, idea is very true. The sort of strength and direction that the building manager, the body corporate manager, and the committee provide. I mean, it's everything. And it's amazing how much goes on and how much work those three parties do that no one ever sees. There's these big buildings. There's a lot going on.
Yep. Is there more going on than what you thought?
No, I'm just more involved with it. I mean, I've seen what goes on from the periphery as a building manager over the years. So I know there are things going on, and now I'm just having to do them. Which is slightly, takes a little bit longer when you're actually having to be the one to do these things.
I've always felt, and probably rightly so, that the relationship between the committee, body corporate, and the body corporate manager is that's their main relationship, and I think it's largely due to the financial aspect of things and looking after the accounts and paying the bills and things, and we tend to be like a secondary relationship. Is that true for you, having seen both sides?
Comparing the relationship of building managers against body corporate managers with the committee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys are more like their go-to than we would be, for example.
Yeah. And I guess, I think that from what I see, that comes out of, if the committee has trouble with a building manager, for example, the body corporate manager will help work through that. It's not often the other way around for some reason. I don't really know why. But mostly, in my view, it should be, the body corporate managers shouldn't really be, sort of managing the building manager. It should be a rarity. I think there's probably too much of that in the industry general, in my view. I always thought that the building manager and the body corporate manager should, really mostly be on a fairly even footing.
Yep.
If anything, the building manager spends more hours serving the building than the body corporate manager.
Actually on site.
Yeah. Well, just in general. So yeah, I mean, I think most of the time they should be on, even footing. And if anything, that whole practice of, the building manager reporting through the body corporate manager to the committee is quite inefficient. There are some body corporate managers that like the building manager to report to them, and then they'll pass the message on to the committee, but it's a very inefficient way of doing it.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I think there should be a transparent, open line of communication between all three. It's we're all sort of big enough and ugly enough to be able to look after ourselves in that regard, and it's kind of I think I've seen that from certain companies where it's like a control thing. They just like to know that every bit of information goes through them, and I just think some things you don't have to know about, but I guess that's the way they like to work.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the situation too. I mean, there are times when the body corporate manager may be able to add some value and work with the building manager, before discussing various things with the committee. That does happen, but I think really it needs to, building managers generally should be able to just deal directly with the committee and CC the body corporate manager for most things.
Yep. So you're finding with being on a different side of the fence now, say if you've got to actually plan, say, a committee meeting for a building. So you've got to get all the documentation ready, get all the financials ready, send out probably not so much the notices, I guess, for a committee meeting, but you've got to arrange a meeting. And then do you find that a fair part of your job is actually, do you steer that, or do you just let the committee do their thing and you are more recording, or do you sort of have some, do you drive those meetings?
It's a mixture. I think the best case is when there's a good, knowledgeable, balanced committee that can drive things themselves. That being said, that's just not always the case. Often, dealing with lay people that don't have a lot of expertise in running these buildings, and it helps a lot if the body corporate manager and possibly the building manager help drive these meetings. But best case scenario, and this is where the changes to the legislation have been driven to and need to be driven further, is increasing the level of expertise on committees, increasing the professionalism, so that the committees can take the lead themselves.
So often we hear from committees, whether they be new or existing, inexperienced or experienced, that they underestimate the amount of time it takes to be on a committee, especially say a chairperson or someone that's heavily invested in making sure that committee is successful. The amount of emails and correspondence and just things they've got to tick off and be across, can be it's been quite daunting for a couple of new chair people that we've talked to recently, and they're like, we didn't get an introduction to this. And you kind of, I guess, it's one of those unfortunate things in some cases where they might be the last person standing. Everyone else is sitting on their hands at the meeting, and they're all real quick to vote when that person is nominated or what have you. But do you find that, have you seen that sort of thing happen where people are like, man, it's a lot more time than I thought?
Oh, all the time. Yep, definitely.
And so it's just part of our job though to help them with that time, essentially, right? Because I see our roles really as being doing the duties so that they don't have to do them, so that they should really just be in like governance rather than doing.
Yes, yep, I agree. And I mean, I guess it'd be nice if it kept progressing in that direction. I think, especially the building management industry needs to be paid well enough to do that effectively. That's another sort of area, in my personal view, that needs to keep changing.
Totally.
It's all very well to say, okay, Mr. Building Manager, you did this, you did this, you did this, and you did this. But often, the fees are paid. There's just not enough time. Yep,
and they don't reflect the, sometimes the skills that people will need. The fees often don't reflect that, or they think that we're, in a certain level that we're not at. I guess that's why these consultants come in and they charge the earth, but they're like, oh yes, that's no problem. We'll just pay for them. No worries. It's expected of them. But that's certainly why we've got to make up portfolios of buildings. You can't just have one manager with one building, because there's, you know, the incomes are, or the fees are not up to it. You know, you've got to create portfolios.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and so you would operate in you'd have a portfolio of buildings, I'd imagine, and do you sort of do end to end management, or do you do like part of it and someone else helps out? How does it work?
So from the body corporate management side, we have a team. You have the account manager, which is myself. We have a big accounts team. So part of body corporate management is holding the bank account and paying all the invoices. So that's quite a lot of work. We'll have an assistant work with me. We have a separate debt collection department. Also a separate legal guy, and, you know, sort of senior staff as well. So it's very day-to-day team oriented. Like every day, you know, we're working pretty closely. You know, much the same as active with the, you know, you've got your cleaners, your building managers, your grounds, your night patrol, and various, you know, admin staff. So day-to-day, it's very team oriented.
That's cool though, right? You've sounds like you've got a good support team around you as well. These bloody chairs creaking. That's saying something about my weight at the moment. But it sounds like you've got a great team around you, and you all work together, and it's not just like one person, you know, necessarily doing everything. You've got like specialised support.
Yeah, and every company's different. Some companies that do body corporate management, the body corporate managers themselves do, you know, they might do all the accounting as well. But I have to say that, you know, I really like the setup that we have.
That's good. So how about an AGM? Because I see the AGM is like, if you look at it from a sporting analogy, it's like the test match for the year for that particular building. You know, it's the time when all the accounts are presented, the budget is to be signed off. You know, people get to have their say. Building manager does a report. You guys do a report. It's like the main part of the year, the test match, like I say. How have you found your preparation for those different from being a building manager?
Not as different as you would think, actually. Quite similar. I mean, in simple terms, it's important to be well prepared. I guess our preparation, our preparation does extend weeks and months before. There's sort of an official process of communication that leads into an AGM. You know, there's a notice that goes out 3 weeks before, the agenda goes out 2 weeks before, and then you have the actual meeting. So there's quite a process involved with, you know, various of our team that leads into that, and that's the hefty part of our job. Getting all that information out to everyone. And that's where the report writing comes in, and, you know, we rip through the budgets. That can take some time, and I was told at one point that you can think of the role I have now as being centred around the AGM. That's you know, the central part of a body corporate manager's life, and it all sort of flows from that. So often when you have to make changes at a complex, it will be at the AGM. You approve the annual budget, you place the insurance, you might change the body corporate rules, you often will discuss anything significant, and a lot of it flows from the AGM. Committee meetings are obviously key in that as well through the year.
Yep. Oh, look, we've all been to some interesting AGMs throughout our history. The 6-hour one for a building which will remain nameless is still the record.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was 6 hours we'll never get back, and there were more lawyers in the room than owners. But yeah, mate, that was a shambles, that one. But anyway, the result came all right.
Yep.
But so from that point of view, then you say that the AGM is like the key point for the year, the financial year and whatever. How long does it actually take to get all that stuff ready? Because you've got certain times prior to the meeting, we've got to send out certain correspondence, right? So it all kind of starts. Is it a month before?
Oh, well, for me, probably 3 months before. And there's we've got I've got a schedule with, you know, something like, I don't know, eight dates for each building, and that would include, so you start, if it's a bigger building, well, actually for all the buildings, you start off by confirming the AGM date with the committee and or chairperson, maybe 3 months out. There's very important dates around insurance that we need to keep a close eye on, which are not always exactly aligned with the AGM. So there's insurance expiry dates. Very important that a building's not uninsured for obvious reasons.
Don't want to get that wrong.
Yeah, and then if it's a big building, you've got your pre-AGM committee meeting. So we need to essentially prepare the budget and AGM and agenda prior to that. And then there's a fair few decisions and discussion at that pre-AGM committee meeting. And then you're into the notice of intention going out and the agenda going out. You've got to gather any agenda items that are sent in.
There used to be a box of beers back in the old days.
Oh, mate. I better go down the road. Couple of dozen. So especially big buildings, there's a little bit of a difference between big buildings and small buildings. The big buildings definitely, there's a lot more going on, and the committee, the good thing is the committee helped drive that a lot more. But there's quite a few, and so we're always looking at making, ticking off, okay, what's coming up.
Perfect lead into my next question, which was around the big versus small building thing. Because sometimes the small buildings can be more work than the bigger ones. Is that still the case in body corp management?
Yep. Oh, no, it's probably the other way around, actually.
Oh, that's how it should be.
Yeah. Which is different. Yeah, different to building management. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah. So what are the big differences in between a small building and a big building from what you do now?
I think obviously with the building manager is a big part of what those differences are. So a small 5-unit building typically won't have a building manager. So a body corporate manager will do the accounting and legal, and the owners will do the maintenance. At a bigger building, it's the same except a building manager does the maintenance. But at a bigger building, there just tends to be a lot more. I think it's just a lot more going on. So there's more systems in the building. There's more tenants. There's a higher level of, issues to deal with residents and maintenance, and more decisions to make. You might have 20 lines in the budget for various different things rather than 5 lines. Especially when you've got these big buildings with indoor common areas or pools or that kind of thing. And I think the big, the sort of 50, 100 plus buildings, there's just more going on day to day. The little buildings, I guess, just less systems and life is simpler. And I guess that whole, with that maintenance thing, just falling on the owners, which doesn't mean they always manage it very well. There's plenty of small buildings that could really benefit from a building manager, but that obviously, as you know, that cost is a stumbling block. Yeah.
Is there a particular size that you think of building where they would, you should say, well, your X amount of units, you should have a building manager? Have you seen anything like that since you've been managing accounts?
Probably. I mean, I saw a lot of that at Active, and I see a lot of it now as well. Probably. I don't know, it's probably around 20 or 30. Depends heavily on the calibre of committee members as well. So you get some buildings where they have a fantastic chairperson who is knowledgeable in body corporates and say maintenance and the property industry, and just takes the lead, is happy to put a few hours in, and is makes the right decisions, and that's fantastic.
Do you think that difference in calibre is more evident when you've got, say, you're dealing with an investor as opposed to an owner-occupier?
Well, obviously the owner-occupiers tend to be more interested in being involved. That's for sure. Especially if they live there. Yeah. I mean, the commercials, some of the investors are quite savvy, so it's slightly different for the a block of shops or a commercial development. Some of those investors are quite savvy and just because they're not living there, some of those still do a really good job.
Yeah, potentially they're more commercially minded as an investor. They sort of think more about the return, whereas the owner-occupier might think more about the day-to-day sort of comfort levels of all the
the commercial invest. I mean, if you think of what people buy when they buy property, the people that buy commercial property as a group would tend to be far more knowledgeable about the property industry in general than people as a group that would buy a residential property. There's plenty of people that buy a residential property that they're not experts. They might have one investment. And this might be it.
Just circling back to AGMs, because there's a question I was going to ask you about when you did your first AGM. So you've done your first sort of solo flight. Were you shitting yourself?
Yeah.
I would imagine so, man.
Yeah. I've been told that I speak well enough.
Yeah. It's nice to know.
I've been told sometimes I speak too much.
Not at all.
So the confidence of just speaking in front of people's there is, it's a bit nerve-wracking. There is quite a lot of detail to understand in these AGMs, and also while you're reading out this stuff, you need to be writing minutes and taking votes as well. And these days, managing people in the room and often managing video conference as well.
Oh, crikey.
So it's a real multitasking situation. So it's just, sort of keeping all your fingers in the right place and keeping tabs on what was going on that probably made me nervous. And there's quite a lot of detail in those agendas. Crikey, they can be really dull and boring at times, but people might ask questions about two things on an agenda, but it's a different two things every time, and that's when you need to sort of understand all the workings.
Well, as well as chairing the meeting and making sure that it flows and keeps moving, you don't get bogged down in one particular issue. So you've got to do all those things that you were saying and get it to an end.
Yes, I don't usually have too much trouble keeping it flowing. Occasionally I have to remind myself not to be too blunt and to be polite to people.
It's called being assertive, being direct.
Yeah.
No, man, and you can tell good account managers when they have a natural they control and they keep things moving, and the ones who struggle with groups of people or making decisions or keeping things moving, it's really clear straight away. You've been to enough AGMs over the years to be able to, I guess, have some part of it stored away and what to expect. Yeah,
to be fair, a 4-hour meeting that took 2 hours longer than it should have doesn't help everyone.
Yeah.
You can be not assertive enough, that's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, it's good, man. It's good to hear that you're enjoying it. It's the industry certainly needs good people in it. And it's good to hear that you've found what you enjoy doing.
Yeah, it's an interesting industry to be in. It's got a fair way to go. It's interesting to understand it and to see where it's going. And you and I have, over the years, for example, building management, we've compared to commercial facilities management. And when you think about where commercial facilities management is and where building management has to go to get there, there's some change that has happened and more change to come. And it's a little bit similar on the body corporate management side. I think it's a bit more mature in many ways, but that committee side of it could definitely use some change.
I think the reason why it's probably a bit more mature is that the Unit Titles Act actually refers to the body corporate manager. It doesn't refer to building managers or property managers, and I think it should. I think I'd love to have some sort of got rules or guidelines or code of conduct or whatever for building and facility managers, because there's nothing, I think people don't really take us that seriously, or as seriously as we perhaps should be taken. To not have a mention in the Unit Titles Act is, I guess it can be good and bad, I guess, but I'd prefer that we were more recognised than what we are.
Don't worry, Brady, you mentioned plenty in all my agendas. We're very happy to assign tasks to the building manager.
Yeah, for sure.
In the minutes.
Well, that's the way it should be, because I mean, one thing you guys probably always have to put up with is a bit of contract creep, right? You're
Yes.
an administrative service, but then you kind of do get dragged into, especially on the smaller ones where they don't have a building manager, you get dragged into being a quasi building manager anyway.
Yep. Yeah, very, very true. Yeah, scope creep. I would say is definitely an issue in the body corporate management land. Yeah, definitely an issue, and I know it's an issue for building management for sure.
Yeah, big time.
It's one of the harder parts of running the business, I think.
Yep. Then, do you actually do any commercial stuff, or are you mainly residential?
Yeah, a bit of both. I've got a number of small commercials. Yeah, and they seem to tick along well. I think largely because, as I said before, some of the people involved on the committees are pretty smart people that know the property industry, understand maintenance, especially. So that works well.
Gee, that is 2 boxes of beers now.
2 boxes of beer.
I'm gonna leave those in too. I'm not gonna edit them out.
Nothing changes, eh? Turn it off now.
Yeah, I guess just to wrap it up, because your phone's bloody running hot. What's the thing that you miss the least about going from building management into account management? I reckon I know the answer.
Probably the after hours stuff, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, 10 years ago, I didn't really mind it. Maybe that's having a family. When I was single, it's not such a thing just to have to be able, whip away and fix a garage door or whatever. But when you've got a family and you have plans and you're the footy coach and that sort of thing, it's more attractive to just to be able to block that off. Always got a love for building management and building managers and the industry.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you're in it for what you say, 12, 13 years. So it's definitely forms a big part of your life and that. So and you're still around them. You're still around them.
Oh,
so
yeah. Talking to them every day.
Yeah. Oh man, it's cool. It's been good to have a catch up with you, and you're really, like I said, I'm intrigued about the crossover elements of going from building and facility management, operations management, through to body corporate account management.
Yep.
It's great to see that you've found your groove, you found your lane, and that you're doing well. And man, we just look forward to doing a bit more work with you in the future, and seeing you around the traps still.
Yeah. Oh, you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be around.
Awesome.
I'll be around annoying people.
Nice one. Thanks, Drew.
Thanks.